I never wanted neighbors, and I sure as hell never wanted a neighborhood association telling me how my trees should look. That's why I bought 5 acres of wooded land at the base of the Blue Ridge, where the only thing I'd see out my kitchen window was lake water and leaves. I built this house myself. Every nail, every beam, every plank. Took me nearly 2 years, working weekends and summers in between consulting gigs. Retired early from the Forest Service, started advising on sustainable housing, figured it was time I took my own advice and carved out some peace in the world. And it was peaceful until Lake Pine Trails grew teeth. See? Lake Pine Trails is a planned development that hugs the edge of the lake like a purse snatcher. Vinyl-sided homes in eggshell white and slate gray, all boxed in tight with matching flower beds and those little solar lights that never really work. My property sits adjacent. My southern line backs up to their communal lakefront. It's separated by a thick patch of trees and a narrow service road, the kind nobody drives unless they're lost, drunk, or both. I thought that was buffer enough. But then came Karen. Karen Janelle, HOA president of Lake Pine Trails, mid-50s, silver helmet hair, always in a pastel power suit like she's about to give a TED Talk on shrub symmetry. The kind of woman who probably alphabetizes her condiments and has a favorite brand of beige. I met her once about a year ago when she knocked on my door to hand me a flyer about participating in community-wide sidewalk pressure washing. I told her I didn't have a sidewalk. She blinked, then smiled like she just tasted vinegar and said, "Well, maybe one day you'll want to be part of something bigger than yourself." That was the end of that until the tree. The tree in question is a white oak. Not just old, ancient, 70 ft tall, thicker than a bear hug, with bark-like rippling armor and limbs that stretch so wide they practically give shade to the damn lake. Planted itself probably long before any of us got here. It stands maybe 5 ft inside my property line, leaning slightly east toward the HOA homes, but solid as bedrock. I filed for its protected status 6 years ago and got it. Local environmental landmark registered with the county, framed the certificate myself, hung it in my mudroom. A week ago, Lake Pine Trails held one of their HOA meetings. I'm not a member, of course. I live on unincorporated land outside their charter. But since I was mentioned by name in the email forwarded to me by a rebellious resident, bless her, I decided to walk over. It was held in their clubhouse. A beige box with plastic chairs, stale coffee, and a sign that said, "Unity through order." There were maybe 24 people seated, all turned toward Karen, who stood at a folding table with a projector. On the screen behind her was a slide that read, "Visual obstruction tree on Mr. McCready property." I didn't say a word, just leaned against the back wall, arms crossed. Karen cleared her throat and clicked her remote. "Residents have expressed concern," she began, "that this particular tree significantly impairs the communal lake view from several homes in the eastern cul-de-sac. It creates an unsightly break in the visual continuity of our shoreline." Someone murmured, "Agreement." Another nodded. Karen continued, "We believe the responsible action is to remove it. We've reached out to Mr. McCready to request that he address the issue." I raised my hand. She flinched. "I didn't get any such request," I said. Karen smiled like a catfish. "Well, consider this it," she replied sweetly. "Would you be willing to work with us on this, Ethan?" "It's a protected tree," I said. "Landmarked on my private property, not going anywhere." A pause. Karen stared at me like I just told her I was growing mushrooms in the basement. Someone in the front whispered, "Wait, it's protected?" I stepped forward. "Yes, filed with the county. It's a white oak classified heritage flora. I've got the certificate in a frame if anyone wants to stop by and admire it." Karen's face tightened. She adjusted her cardigan like she was putting on armor. "With respect," she said, "just because something is old doesn't make it valuable. If it's impacting community aesthetics, it's not," I cut in. "It's impacting your view, specifically your kitchen window. I've seen the sight lines." A few chuckles from the back. Karen didn't like that. Her jaw clenched, and she smoothed her skirt like she was fighting the urge to throw it at me. "Well, we'll see what the board decides," she said. "I don't think you will," I answered, "because this isn't up to the board. This is a tree on private out of jurisdiction land. You've got no say." That was the end of the discussion. I turned and left. As I was walking back across the service road, I heard her mutter behind me loud enough for everyone to hear. "Some people just don't understand community responsibility." I smiled because I knew what she really meant was, some people don't do what I tell them. What I didn't know yet was just how far she was willing to go to make me understand. A few nights after the HOA meeting, I was up late working on a presentation for a state F-funded sustainability grant. Something about integrating rainwater systems into modular housing. I just shut down my laptop and was heading for bed when I had this strange sensation, like the woods outside were too quiet. No wind, no frogs, just stillness, dense and wrong. I stood in the doorway for a moment, mug in hand, staring out across the yard. Moonlight cut across the grass, illuminating the silhouette of that great white oak, still standing tall, solid as ever. I took a sip of tea and went to bed. The next morning, the world split open. I woke to a sick, heavy sound like a body hitting concrete, only bigger. Then came the metallic screech of something getting crushed and then yelling. I bolted upright, threw on jeans, boots, and a flannel. Grabbed the flashlight, even though it was already light out, and ran out the door. That's when I saw it. The oak, my oak, was down. The entire trunk sprawled across my gravel driveway, splinters and branches scattered like shrapnel. The ground was torn up where the roots had been severed. My stomach dropped, and then I saw the car, a black Dodge Charger, completely pancaked under the upper trunk. Roof flattened, windshield shattered into diamonds, front end twisted like it had been through a crusher. Smoke curled lazily out from under the hood. And next to it, standing with a phone in one hand and both eyes wide as hell, Karen Janelle. She was in a cream-colored tracksuit, hair pinned up in a visor, face pale. Beside her were two men in matching navy polos, HOA branded. I kid you not. One of them was still holding a chainsaw. The other was looking at the mess like he couldn't decide whether to run or vomit. "What the hell did you do?" I shouted, coming down the slope. Karen turned to me, voice high-pitched, panicked. It was supposed to fall the other way. I stopped a few feet from the scene, staring at the carnage. "You cut it down?" She looked like a deer in headlights. We thought we could handle it. We just wanted to fix the view." "The view?" I said slowly, the fury starting to push past the shock. "You trespassed onto my property at dawn with a chainsaw, and you cut down a federally protected tree," one of the HOA guys muttered. "We thought it was shared use land." "It's not," I snapped. "It's clearly marked on every plot line in this township." And more importantly, that's when the front door of my house opened and a man stepped out holding a mug of coffee. Trace Harper, tall, black, about 40, sharp-cut suit, even at that hour, with an OIG badge clipped to his hip. Office of Inspector General, the guy I was consulting with on the federal sustainability grant. He'd spent the night in my guest room after Wes stayed up talking shop and reviewing documents. He took one look at his car, and the color drained from his face. Then he squinted at the tree, then at Karen, then at the chainsaw. Is that my car?" Karen blinked at them like she was seeing a ghost. I didn't know it was yours. I thought it was his. Trace walked over slowly, set his coffee on the hood of my pickup, and pulled out his badge. "I'm going to need you to step back," he said calmly. "You've just destroyed a federally issued vehicle while illegally trespassing with power tools on camera." Karen's mouth opened, then closed. The two HOA goons took a synchronized step backward. Trace pulled out his phone. "I was on a Bluetooth call with DC this morning. The whole thing's probably on record." He looked at me. "Do you have outdoor surveillance?" I nodded. "More than one, including the feeder cam in the birdhouse." Karen turned to me, face blotchy now. "Please, this is all just a misunderstanding." Trace cut her off. "Ma'am, you are on private property. You are not law enforcement. You have no warrant, no jurisdiction, no authority, and this," he pointed to the crushed Charger, "is a federal asset. Hope your HOA has great insurance." Karen looked like she was about to faint. One of the workers mumbled something about getting the truck, but Trace raised a hand and said, "Nobody's going anywhere." I could almost hear the click of the moment when everything started spiraling for her. She looked between me, Trace, the car, and the tree. Then she actually had the audacity to mutter, "It's just a tree." Trace raised an eyebrow. "Lady, you just committed 3 crimes before breakfast. Don't minimize it." I pulled out my phone and started calling the sheriff. Karen just stood there, trapped in her own mess. And all I could think was, of all the cars in the world, of all the mornings to play lumberjack dictator, she managed to drop my tree on a goddamn federal Charger. Some people call that karma. I call it Tuesday. The thing about working in forestry for over 2 decades is you learn to pay attention to what most folks miss. Bent twigs, a trail of disturbed soil, shadows that don't belong. So when the sheriff's deputies arrived that morning, blue lights strobing through my pines, clipboard already out, I was already a few steps ahead. Karen had stopped pretending she was in control. She kept pacing near the ruined charger, babbling about windstorms and freak accidents, eyes darting like a squirrel on espresso. The 2 HOA workers had gone dead silent, clearly realizing they were now part of something that might end with a courtroom sketch and some community service in neon vests. I gave my initial statement calmly, pointing out the property lines and noting the tree's protected status. The deputy was young, polite, but visibly unnerved once he realized the owner of the crushed car was standing a few feet away with a federal badge and the world's flattest poker face. Trace had already called in his own people. A vehicle incident involving government property wasn't just a bureaucratic hiccup. It was a full-blown liability trigger. While they photographed the scene, I headed inside to grab the memory cards from my camera system. I have 5 cameras around the property. 2 motion sensors along the driveway, 1 under the porch, 1 in the tool shed, and the sneakiest of them all, a tiny fisheye lens tucked inside an old birdhouse that hangs just above the tree line. I installed it years ago to catch raccoons breaking into my compost bin. Never thought it would end up recording a neighborhood coup. The footage was clear, grainy in the early dawn light, but clear enough. Timestamped high-res audio. There she was. Karen on my land in her little HOA jacket, flashlight in one hand, pointing at my oak like a general inspecting the enemy line. "Start here," she whispered to one of Themen. Trunks angled toward the slope. "If we cut from this side, it'll fall across his driveway. He'll think it just collapsed overnight." One of the guys hesitated. "Isn't this like his tree?" Karen: "Technically yes, but trees don't have GPS. It'll look natural. Windy morning. Who's going to check?" Another voice chimed in. "It's not even that windy." Karen snapped. "He's not going to take us to court over a goddamn tree." I paused the playback and stared at the screen for a while. Not because I was shocked at that point. Nothing Karen did could surprise me, but because the arrogance in her voice was just exhausting. That smug certainty that the world would fold around her like a brochure. I burned the footage to a USB stick and started a secure upload to cloud storage just in case someone got creative later. While I was at it, I checked my phone and noticed a new voicemail from the local sheriff's office. Apparently, Karen had just filed a formal report. According to her version, she was out for a morning walk when she heard the tree fall. Out of concern for safety, she called over a few HOA maintenance staff to help clear the road. Right. I forwarded the footage to the deputy on site who watched it once, cursed under his breath, and radioed in for a supervisor. An hour later, a county forensic arborist arrived. Nice woman. Tough boots, clipboard, hair in a bun tight enough to bounce bullets. She circled the stump twice, crouched beside it, then stood and announced, "This wasn't natural. Clean lateral cut about 20 and above grade. No wind shear, no splintering at the base. Chainsaw recent, maybe 3 hours ago." Karen tried to argue. But the wind this morning, the arborist cut in, was 5 mph coming from the opposite direction. This tree fell perfectly downhill. Not sideways, not twisted, just placed like a drunk lumberjack playing Jenga with government property. I bit the inside of my cheek to keep from laughing. The deputy started photographing the cut and marking out a wider perimeter. Karen was no longer pacing. She was quiet, still like a statue of someone slowly realizing they'd just pissed off the federal government and a former forest ranger in the same morning. I stayed back. Did what I've always done. Documented everything. Copied the footage twice, labeled the USBs, printed out the protected tree documentation from the county's online system, cross-referenced the GPS coordinates of the tree's original registration with my property line, 4T3 and inside my border. I didn't say a damn word when one of the deputies read Karen her rights. I just stood by the ruined roots of that oak and watched as the arrogance drained from her face like red wine from white carpet. You'd think this would be the end of it. But Karen wasn't done yet, not by a long shot. I've seen wildfires move slower than what happened next. By the end of the day, The federal IG office had filed an internal incident report, and a representative from the U.S. Attorney's Office in Richmond called me directly asking if I'd be willing to cooperate in a federal inquiry. I told him I'd already printed 2 copies of everything color-coded by idiocy level. He laughed. I didn't. Meanwhile, Trace was moving fast. He'd activated his department's internal protocol for destruction of government property, and his agency wanted to press charges not just for the vehicle, but for obstruction, unlawful entry, and potential interference with an ongoing federal contract. This wasn't just about a tree anymore. It was a legal avalanche, and Karen was snowboarding straight into it without a helmet. I hired a lawyer, Linda Shaw. Old friend, brilliant mind, used to clerk for the circuit court, and now handled land use and civil litigation. She arrived on my porch wearing boots and a look like she'd already read Karen's soul and found it lacking. Within 2 hours, Linda had drafted a formal civil suit against Karen and the HOA for trespassing, unlawful destruction of property, and negligence. She also started coordinating with the county to file an environmental complaint for illegal removal of a registered protected tree. Karen, meanwhile, was busy trying to rewrite reality. I got a call from the zoning office 2 days later. A clerk, hesitant, asked if I'd recently adjusted my property boundaries or if there had been some shared maintenance agreement with the HOA. My blood chilled. I told him there was no such agreement. Never had been, never would be. He sighed and said Karen had submitted a parcel map showing that the tree, my tree, was within Lake Pine Trails Association Green Zone. She attached a document marked Revised Easement Overlay, complete with a fancy seal and a signature from a Marquis Johnson licensed surveyor. The problem? I know Mark Johnson with an H, not Johnson. He was the guy who helped me file the tree's protection status years ago, and I knew damn well he didn't sign off on any easement overlay involving HOA land. I drove straight to the county office, requested a physical copy of the submitted map, and stared at it in the clerk's hand. It was slick, crisp fonts, QR code linking to a dead web page, even a watermark that looked legit until I held it to the light and saw the HOA logo faintly ghosted behind it like a bad Photoshop job on a fake diploma. I called Mark Johnson. He picked up on the second ring. "Did you sign anything for Lake Pine Trails this week?" "Hell no," he said. "Why?" "Because apparently there's a ghost version of you signing off on my land being someone else's." Long pause. "You're kidding me." "I wish." Mark faxed me a sworn affidavit within the hour, stating he had never surveyed the land in question for the HOA and that the document was falsified. Linda was already typing up a motion for injunctive relief. When I got back while we were gathering statements, another surprise landed in my inbox. An invitation to a Lake Pine Trails emergency Zoom meeting. Topic: Community Conflict Resolution, Tree Incident Follow-Up. I was listed as a relevant party. I had no plans to attend until I got a text from one of my contacts inside the HOA, someone who wasn't exactly a Karen fan. It read, "Join the Zoom. Trust me, they're going to try to paint you as unhinged." So I joined, muted, camera off. Just listened at first. Karen led the meeting, of course. She wore a soft pink sweater and her community unity smile. Around 24 people were logged in. She started talking about ongoing disputes with adjacent landowners and how unfortunate it was that personal grievances were becoming litigious matters. Then she said it. "I just want everyone to understand that we acted in good faith. We had maps that showed the tree was within the association's visual zone, and unfortunately it fell before we could properly assess the structural integrity." I clicked the unmute button. "Hi, Karen. Hope the HOA legal team's watching this." She froze, blinked, then smiled like someone finding a spider in their sock. "Oh, Mr. McCready, I didn't realize you were on the call. Clearly, I'm here to clarify a few things." Someone in the meeting chuckled. I shared my screen. First slide, the county registered boundary map. Clear lines. My name, a boundary's nowhere near the tree. Second slide, a side-by-side of the fake parcel map Karen submitted with the fake signature and the real one, complete with Mark Johnson's affidavit, stamped across it. Third slide, a paused video frame from my birdhouse cam. Karen standing next to the tree whispering, "Cut it fast. He won't know it was us." I hit play. The audio played clear as crystal. You could hear the chainsaw starting up in the background. The Zoom went dead silent. Then someone unmuted. "Karen, what the hell?" Another voice. You lied to us, a third. Is that why we've been getting calls from the sheriff? Karen tried to recover. This is taken out of context. It's your voice, I said. The meeting devolved into chaos. HOA board members yelling over each other, someone cursing, someone else asking if they could be personally liable. I sat back, sipped tea, and watched the entire sandcastle she'd built collapse in front of her, pixel by pixel, and I hadn't even filed the federal charges yet. There's armament after the roar of the chainsaw, the crash of the tree, the shriek of crushed metal, and lies where everything just goes quiet. That's what it felt like after the Zoom meeting. Quiet. But it wasn't peace. It was the pause before judgment. The next morning, I stepped out onto my porch with coffee and found a stack of letters rubber-banded to my gate post. Anonymous drop-off. Some typed, some handwritten, all from Lake Pine Trail's residents. Most of them started with some version of, "I'm sorry." A few said they had no idea what Karen had been doing in their name. One had a copy of the original HOA charter with a sticky note. Clause 6.2, President may be removed for cause. By mid-morning, Karen's authority was unraveling faster than a polyester suit in a bonfire. Linda, my lawyer, was in her element. She'd filed the civil suit officially, and within 48 hours, the county had issued a notice of violation for illegal tree removal and unauthorized land activity. The fine for that alone was $38,000. Not HOA money, Karen's, but the real hammer was coming from higher up. Trace, still cool as ever, called me that afternoon. Federal vehicle loss is being reviewed by DOJ. Destruction of federal property, trespass, falsification of documents, obstruction. They're not going to treat this as suburban drama. They're calling it intentional interference with federal agency operations. He let that sit a second. They're pissed, Ethan, and when the feds get pissed, they audit everything. I could almost hear Karen's collagen contract folding in half from wherever she was hiding. Meanwhile, Linda had started compiling witness testimony. We met with 2 HOA board members, disillusioned, tired, and surprisingly cooperative. Turns out Karen had been running the association like a private kingdom for years. Unrecorded decisions, retroactive rule enforcement, fines without votes, and even pocketing a few community improvement fees for some new patio furniture that mysteriously resembled her own. We got it all. Signed statements, email, printouts. One guy, Evan, brought a voice memo from a past HOA meeting where Karen yelled at an elderly resident for unauthorized lawn ornamentation. The offense, a ceramic owl. By the end of the week, we had enough to file a formal ethics complaint to the HOA Oversight Council of Virginia. Linda added a motion for immediate injunctive relief to block Karen from using any HO funds for legal defense, citing breach of fiduciary duty, abuse of office, and malicious representation. But my favorite part, we got the HOA's insurance carrier on the phone. Now, I don't know if you've ever heard the sound of a corporate insurance adjuster, realizing they're about to pay out 6 figures on behalf of someone who forged a parcel map. But I'll tell you, it's better than jazz. The silence, the slow breath, the phrase, "We may need to evaluate our coverage terms." That afternoon, I received word that the HOA board had called an emergency vote to suspend Karen, pending further legal developments. I wasn't there, but I heard the motion passed 112-1. Guess who voted against it? Karen, of course, but by then she was already in deeper trouble. The county had opened a criminal inquiry into the fake survey map. Mark Johnson had filed a formal affidavit stating that his name and credentials were used without consent, and that the signature on the revised easement overlay was a forgery. Forgery of official documents in Virginia. That's a Class 4 felony up to 10 years. She had committed a crime trying to retroactively justify another crime she committed while covering up the first one. It was incompetence with layers. I didn't smile. Not exactly, but I may have whistled while changing the batteries on my birdhouse cam. Linda said we were looking at court dates in a matter of weeks. Maybe sooner if the federal charges moved quickly. Still, I wasn't gloating. I'd seen what HOA politics can do to decent people. How it chews them up, isolates them, shames them into submission. That's why Karen got away with it so long, because she bullied just enough, and the rest of them were too polite, too tired, too unsure of the rules to push back. But not me. I knew the law. I had the footage. I had the land. And this time, the forest was fighting back. The courtroom smelled like old wood and toner. You could feel the stale bureaucracy in the air like a paper jam waiting to happen. I sat at the petitioner's table with Linda, who looked like she'd rather be dissecting Karen's soul with a scalpel than presenting legal arguments. She had 3 folders open, tabs bristling like porcupine quills. Civil suit, criminal complaint, federal coordination. Karen sat across the room with a different look than I'd ever seen on her. Gone was the HOA Barbie energy. No pastel suit, no smug lip curl, no clipboard of doom. She wore navy, unflattering and wrinkled. Her face was pale, and she was flanked by a lawyer who looked like he'd already calculated how much of this case he could bill before jumping ship. This wasn't a criminal trial yet, but it was the preliminary hearing for injunctive relief and formal damages. The judge weighs an older woman, sharp-eyed, dry-voiced, and entirely uninterested in suburban melodrama. She made that clear within 5 minutes. Let's get to the point. There was a tree. Now there is no tree, and someone's got a crushed government vehicle. Linda stood and spoke with that calm, confident tone that makes you sit up straighter, even when you're not the one on trial. She walked the court through every step. The property line, the protected landmark status, the video evidence, the forged survey map, the attempt to deceive both the sheriff and the HOA. She submitted the affidavit from Mark Johnson, the forensic arborist's report, and best of all, the video from the birdhouse cam. The judge watched that part twice. When Karen's voice came through, "Do it before sunrise. He won't know it was us." You could hear an audible shift in the courtroom. The opposing counsel looked like he was trying to disappear into his blazer. Karen fidgeted, but never spoke. Her lawyer tried to argue the map was misfiled, that the tree posed a danger, that the HOA was simply acting preemptively to protect community interests. But the judge didn't buy any of it. She leaned forward slightly. "You trespassed, Mrs. Janelle. You ordered the destruction of property that did not belong to you. You fabricated documents to justify that action, and you lied to law enforcement when asked about it." Her gavel hit the block like a thunderclap. "I'm granting full injunctive relief to Mr. McCready. Lake Pine Trails HOA and Karen Janelli are jointly and severally liable for damages totaling $138,000 covering the destroyed landmark, restoration of his property, and partial compensation for the federal vehicle loss as per the DOJ's secondary claim." Karen closed her eyes. The judge wasn't done. Furthermore, this court is forwarding evidence of document forgery and perjury to the county prosecutor's office. I trust they'll know what to do with it. Trace, sitting 2 rows behind me, nodded slowly, didn't smile, didn't blink, just nodded. And that's when it really started to fall apart. Within 72 hours, the HOA board formally removed Karen from her position. No ceremony, no thank you letter, just an email with a PDF that read, "Termination of executive role pursuant to Charter Clause 6.2 HOA members voted in a new president. Our tired school principal named Rita, who publicly swore never to touch a chainsaw." Local media picked up thestery under headlines like "Suburban HOA President Faces Felony Charges After Tree Debacle" and "When Karen's Attack Oak Tree Edition." One outlet interviewed me on the porch with the crushed remains of the Dodge Charger still partially roped off behind them. I didn't say much, just stood there, arms crossed while the camera panned over the stump. Then came the sentencing. Karen accepted a plea deal, 18 months probation, 200 hours of community service, and a personal fine of $47,000. She nearly fainted when the judge clarified that no HOA funds may be used for payment. Her 2 hired workers cooperated fully, testified that she had directed the entire operation, promised it was pre-approved, and told them not to worry about the grumpy hermit next door. Grumpy hermit. I should have put that on a t-shirt. The federal side's still moving slowly as they do. But I got a call from someone at DOJ who thanked me for my thorough documentation and cooperation. I told him he was welcome, but if he wanted to thank someone, he should probably send a fruit basket to the birdhouse cam. The oak was gone. Theeland, where it stood, still looked scarred. Raw earth, sawdust, and tire ruts. But I'd already ordered a new sapling, another white oak. Maybe it would take 100 years to grow like the last one, but I had time more than that. I had peace. And now, finally, I had room to breathe again without Karen breathing down my neck. A month later, the new oak arrived in the back of a landscaping truck, roots balled in burlap, branches stiff but promising. It planted it right where the old giant had stood, packed the earth in slow, quiet motions. No ceremony, no words, just me, a shovel, and a second cup of coffee gone cold on the porch rail. Ina met it, Karen, not out of spite. Okay, a little out of spite. A few days later, I put up a new sign near the property line. Laser-etched wood mounted clean and firm. Private property monitored around the clock. Trees bite back. Trace stopped by that afternoon. We sat under the new sapling with lemonades and silence. After a while, he nodded at the plaque and said, "Subtle." I shrugged. Fell turned. He told me the DOJ had finalized my eligibility for the Green Certification Grant. Said the agency wanted to partner on a new regional pilot project, sustainable zoning around protected ecosystems. We'd be building things that lasted, things that mattered. I shook his hand and we didn't say goodbye. Just see you soon. As for Karen, rumor had it she'd sold her house quietly, disappeared to somewhere downstate. HOA members threw a tiny party when she was gone. Plastic cups, lemonade, and someone hung a banner that said, "Restoration begins with roots." The new president, Rita, sent me a handwritten letter. Apology, gratitude, offer to discuss natural buffer zones collaboratively. I pinned it to the fridge under a magnet shaped like an owl. Now and then, hikers or nosy weekenders wander close. They look at the new oak, the scarred ground, the camera in the birdhouse. Some ask what happened here. I just smile and say, nature cleaned up a mess. We helped.